the Harvard Graduate School of Education, working at the nexus of practice, policy, and research.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to the Harvard Black Alumni Society's panel titled Working to Address the High School Dropout Crisis, the Civil Rights Issue of Our Generation. My name is Enoch Woodhouse, and I am the co-president, along with Azar Richmond, of the Harvard Black Alumni Society of New York. We are very, very pleased with this turnout. Over 400 people are here tonight of all ages, races, backgrounds, which is so important to this discussion because it is a discussion that knows no boundaries. I want to open the evening by recognizing the organizations whose support has made tonight possible. The Harvard Alumni Association first served as a co-organizer for tonight's event, offering tremendous support and guidance at every stage of the way. And we are pleased to have the president of the Harvard Alumni Association, Ms. Teresita Alvarez-Bielen, here. Thank you so much for coming. She came all the way from Norway for this, so we are very, very pleased to have her. Serving as the other co-organizer of tonight's event, the Harvard Graduate School of Education, represented here tonight by our moderator, Dean Kathleen McCartney. Thank you so much. We are also proud to thank our signature event sponsors for the roles that they've played day in and day out in addressing the high school dropout crisis. The America's Promise Alliance first was founded in 1997 by General Colin Powell and his wife, Mrs. Alma Powell, to provide children with the key support that they need to graduate from high school and ensure their life success. We're honored to welcome tonight General and Mrs. Powell's son, Mr. Michael Powell, who is on the board of the America's Promise Alliance, former chairman of the FCC, and we are very, very happy to have you here as well, Mr. Powell. Before I thank our final signature sponsor, I'd like to thank you all again for coming and for your generous donations on your way in of books that will go to serve children at the Choir Academy of Harlem, which is a 6 through 12 school up in Harlem. These books will actually go to the classroom of a new member of the Harvard Black Alumni Society of New York, Mr. Jay Lundy, who is doing Teach for America this year. He's giving up 2 years of his life to serve in one of our public schools that is in need of him and his services, and we are very happy to provide those books to the Choir Academy of Harlem. And now finally, our final signature event sponsor is our host tonight, Scholastic. Scholastic is the world's largest publisher and distributor of children's books and a leader in educational technology and children's media. We are so very pleased to have partnered with them to deliver this event tonight, and I would now like to welcome up to the podium Scholastic CEO and Chairman, Mr. Dick Robinson.
Well, thanks, Enoch, very much, and you've got a brilliant organization job he has done to get all of you here, and we're thrilled to have you here in our home. You will hear from a great panel tonight. I was very excited when I saw the people here, realizing that 4 of our panelists have been in this building before. Several of them have talked from this stage, and I've had the privilege of knowing them and helping publicize their work. You will hear several themes tonight, one of which is it's a measure of our society and our will as to what we do with dropouts and with kids who need the skills and the understanding of life to enable them to succeed and prosper and live well, and many do not get that chance. Our company has focused principally on two things that we think we can do something about and do something about. One is relevance. Many kids drop out because what they see in school and feel in school and read in school doesn't relate to the world that they see every day, that they understand, and that they think they can be successful in. And finding ways to make school more relevant is something that we try to do through our books and materials. The second is the skills. Kids who drop out often are not taught well enough in elementary school the skills that they need to be successful. They get into junior high and they can't read the books that are handed out to them. They go from one class to the other, unable to read. They become despondent. They don't feel that they have a future or a place in that school, and they drop out. We try to help them learn to read and help them learn to love to read, and that's another thing that we can do. We're very excited for you that you're going to have a great panel. I know Pedro, having heard him many times, will be a more than adequate substitute for Jonathan Kozol, and will give you a great feeling about the culture of kids and how important that is, and that all of the other panelists will do the same. So we're excited for you, excited and honored to have all of you here, and especially to have our panelists addressing this important subject. So thank you, Enoch. Now, it is my last job here to introduce Dean Kathleen McCartney. I had a small part in supporting the chair that she held in early childhood at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. And when she was interim dean, my fondest hope was that she would become the dean of the School of Education. And fortunately, the president of Harvard agreed, and she is the great dean of the Harvard Graduate School of Education, and she will be the moderator tonight. We love what she does, we love what she stands for and how she thinks, and we're proud to have her here too. So Kathy, thank you so much, and over to you.
Well, what a privilege it is to be here. And I think it speaks so well of Harvard alumni that this event sold out in 2 days, and that Scholastic has had to have satellite rooms so that other people can watch tonight's wonderful panel. I too want to thank Scholastic and America's Promise Alliance, as well as the Harvard Black Alumni Society of New York. But there's one more person we need to give a big round of applause for, and that is the person who made this possible, Enoch Woodhouse. So thank you, Enoch. There are bios of the panelists in this book, so I would refer you to this wonderful book, actually, which has a lot of relevant statistics for tonight's discussion. So for now, I'll just give a brief introduction of people from my right to left. First, we have Dr. James Comer, Associate Dean, and Morris Falk Professor of Child Psychiatry at the Yale School of Medicine. I'm not going to say too much about the panelists, but I was proud to watch Dr. Comer receive an honorary doctorate from Harvard University in 2008. Next is Ruslan Ali, Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights with the U.S. Department of Education. Joel Klein, Chancellor, New York City Department of Education. Michael Brown, CEO and co-founder of City Year, Inc. And last but not least, my friend and former colleague, Pedro Noguera, professor at NYU, and I think activist is a good title for you too. So please join me in welcoming all of the panelists. So I just thought I'd say a few words about why we're here tonight and why this topic is so important. As you may know, only about 7 in 10 children graduate from high school nationally, and that in many of America's largest cities, the statistics are far more sobering. In some of America's biggest cities, only about half of students graduate on time, and in cities like Detroit, Cleveland, Baltimore, and Atlanta, the statistics are even more sobering. And as you all know, there's a huge achievement gap, so that when we talk about these statistics, they tend to be much worse for students of color than for white students. Now, there are some people that like to talk about the consequences of this for the economy. For example, there's a recent McKinsey report that talks about the underutilization of human capital in the United States and what it costs our society. In fact, the costs are equivalent to an economic recession. But I think for those of us on the panel and for those of us who care about American children, the consequences for our young people are extremely dire, and that's why we work so hard to think about ways to address this. Young people who fail to graduate from high school have lower earnings, poorer health, and higher rates of incarceration. If we invested in schools instead of prisons, I think we might be able to make some progress. Before becoming Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan was the superintendent of the Chicago Public Schools, as you all know, and he worked really hard to drive home these sobering facts to Chicago students. Before being allowed to drop out, students were summoned to the principal's office where they had to sign a form that said things like, "I'll be less likely to find a good job that pays well. I'll be more likely to be in a bad job that doesn't pay well. Or maybe I won't find any job at all, and I will be more likely to spend time in jail or go to prison." So clearly there are a number of people like those on the panel who are hard at work thinking about interventions, not just the facts on the ground, but what we might do about it. So I thought I'd say a little bit about the format for this evening. I'm going to start the panel off by asking a first question. They're each going to have no more than 4 minutes to respond, and we've got two young men from City Year right up here with timers and signs. And if that doesn't work, I used to be a second grade teacher, and I think I can whip you into shape if need be. Then I have some questions from the Harvard Black Alumni Society that we'll ask, and then finally we will open the floor up to all of you. There are microphones up here, and I will ask you to keep your comments brief and to ask a question succinctly so that we'll have time for more questions and time to hear from the panelists. So just to get us off to a good start, I'd like to ask each of the panelists, based on your knowledge as well as your collective experiences as practitioners, researchers, and policymakers, what kinds of interventions are likely to be effective with respect to keeping children in school? And I'd like to hear from all of you about what you think the role of schools is and whether or not you think that schools are able to solve this problem alone. So Professor Comer, should we start with you?
Thank you very much. It is a great privilege to be here. I want to start by saying that I think schools have a tremendous role to play. It is the first place in the society that there's an opportunity to socialize and support the development of kids in a way that allows them to be successful in school and in life. And for many low-income, marginalized children, that's their problem, is that they're underdeveloped. They have the potential, but they need to be in an environment that can support their growth and development. And development that doesn't start at adolescence, and we're talking about high school dropouts. High school dropout starts almost at birth, and it is the constant support for physical, social, interactive, psycho-emotional, moral, ethical, linguistic, intellectual, cognitive development over time that enables young people to go into middle school, high school, feeling confident and able to be successful in later life. And that is the focus that we don't have. And in part, we don't have it because we had a society for right up until the 1950s in which you really did not need an education to be successful in life. You could leave school if you weren't doing well, and you could take a job in a farm, a factory, and a variety of other places and be successful. That changed, and it changed very rapidly. The only institution that did not change rapidly in the preparation of its teachers and its organization and management was a school. And school is the place that has to change because it is strategically located in the development of a child and in a society so that those people in the school will be there throughout the life of the child and can intentionally provide them with the kind of growth and support and development and the kind of environment they need to function, to develop and function well. Development and learning are inextricably linked. If you develop well, you learn well. If you don't develop well, you don't learn well. And it's not a matter of teaching, just teaching well. You can't teach children who have not been prepared to receive. And that's the challenge that we have. And as a result of the past and past understanding of how children learn, or lack of understanding of how children learn, we do not have teachers and administrators through no fault of their own. We do not have people prepared to create the culture and the climate that will allow the adults to interact in a way that will support the development of kids. And that's what has to change. As schools of education have to change, and policymakers have to change, and the understanding of what's necessary has to change. But that is happening in a variety of places. And we've been involved, I've been involved in this for 42 years. I've seen it over and over and over. Wherever we can create a good environment, a good culture, we can get improved performance, academic performance, and I argue preparation for life in a much more complex age. That's what's important.
Okay, thank you.
I certainly don't disagree with what Dr. Comer has said, though it's not too late, no matter how old students get and how much they matriculate through the system. The interventions that have been proven to work the best are those that catch students before they start to slip, for sure. Early warning signs. As you've heard about today in the Dean's remarks, this isn't new. And we know what works along the way. That said, schools matter a lot, hugely, in curing the problem of dropouts. Graduating with a high school diploma, though, is not the only prize. It really is about ensuring that all students are ready for college and career, that high school becomes a gateway and not a gatekeeper. Survey data across the country from students themselves, those who are too often left out of these adult conversations, say that students drop out not because they are challenged too much, but because they are bored. So finding a way to ensure that high schools become much more relevant for them, that meet them where they are and pull them up over time so they become competitive in this new global and knowledge-based economy. There are about 48 states that have banded together in this drive to get to common standards so that students learning purportedly college-level work in Mississippi is the same as students learning college-level work in California or Illinois. We ought to support that work so that standards become a real reality and students know what they need to know and are able to do what they should be able to do at every grade level in order for that high school diploma to actually mean something. Specifically to the point about the interventions, as I said, it's certainly about catching them before they slip. It's about not letting students fall through the cracks. We hear from students all over the country that say they were on the verge of dropping out and no one bothered to care. No one bothered to reach out. They didn't have an adult to turn to. They say they didn't think school was important or relevant, that there was nothing in it for them. They don't see the value of that high school diploma in order to succeed in life after high school. So we have a lot of work to do to convince them of that. As the president said to young people recently on or around September 8th, as he spoke to students across the country, he said, when you drop out, you're not just letting down yourself, you're letting down your country. So that we are here talking about civil rights and that we are here talking about dropout prevention and recovery does not go unnoticed to me. It very much is the civil rights issue of our time, but it doesn't look like one. We talk about it as a civil rights movement, but the vestiges of movements of the past aren't apparent here. It's not my kid, it's not my community. In fact, abounds too much in this dialogue. So it's about making it a movement. It's about pulling together the resources, getting to kids where they are, making sure that we accelerate their performance, because if you're behind 1 year alone, growth in a year is not enough. And it's about providing teachers and students the supports they'll need to access a much more rigorous curriculum and demanding atmosphere than they've ever had to before.
Thank you. Chancellor Klein?
It's going to be a panel of heated agreement, I think, so see if we can stir the pot early tonight. Thank you, my friend. So, first of all, I think what Ruslan said is very important. It's about. To me, the most important thing it's about is about stop making excuses for why it is that we don't educate children to an entirely different level. For far too long, we have figured out how to point fingers at everything. It's the family, it's the kid, it's the lack of resources, it's the principals, it's this and it's that. And the shame of it all is we can indeed educate children in our schools to an entirely different level. To the Dean's question, can schools do it alone? I don't know what that question means, quite frankly. What I do know is schools can do an entirely different job for our kids, particularly our kids who come with the greatest challenges. And those are the kids that Dr. Comer is talking about, in which school has to play such a fundamental role. Kids who come from very challenging backgrounds, if they don't get the school piece right, which too many in America don't get, they're not going to succeed. So to me, at its deepest level, is the question of whether we are politically willing to do the tough work and actually make our schools work for the benefit of children and not for the benefit of so many other things that schools now serve in our society. In terms of things and interventions and the dropout rate, let me make 2 points about the dropout rate. The problem with the dropout rate is not simply the number of kids who are dropping out of high school. The problem with the dropout rate is how many kids are actually graduating high school wholly unprepared for college. So if half the kids that graduate from high school are unprepared for college and they need to be remediated in college, then those kids are not going to successfully complete college. So we've got to look at the entire spectrum. And I assure you the rest of the world is not going to wait for us to catch up. The numbers are quite shocking. To me, there are a few core things, and I think, frankly, the President and the Secretary of Education are talking about those things, and I give them enormous credit because they're not always politically popular. The first thing we need to do is substantially raise the standards we expect for our kids. You keep low standards, people perform to low standards, and in any event, they'll be underprepared or unprepared for the challenges they're going to face in the 21st century. We need to insist on accountability. And I understand there are no perfect metrics, but we will be forever arguing about the quality of metrics in order to avoid the harder discussion about accountability. Schools that do not serve kids and serve them well should be shuttered, and we should start over. And we should never, ever be afraid to say that that school is outperforming other schools, because that should become the benchmark. And we should stop thinking that being collegial is the only way we can succeed. Collegiality matters, but also insisting on accountability. Third thing, and probably from my point of view the most important thing, is teacher, 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 effective teachers. The maldistribution, when Ruslan and her colleagues at EdTrust have documented so dramatically, the maldistribution of effective teachers in America, where the neediest kids disproportionately don't get their share of high-quality teachers, is shameful. I don't know a person in this room who would allow me to randomly assign your child to to any school in a large urban school district. Fourth point is more time. Our kids, particularly our challenged kids, are going to need more time on task. And the final point that I want to make is we have got to get serious about innovating, thinking about how we avoid teacher isolation, professionalize the teaching profession, use technology. I was at a school today, we call it the Game School. It's called, more formally, Quest to Learn. What they are doing in terms of engaging students in a different way of thinking about education. But we got in this model one kid, one teacher, 25 kids, and then we argue whether it ought to be 23 or 26. That's the wrong way to think about the problem.
The numbers are staggering when nearly 4 in 10 young people of color don't graduate from high school, when you're 3 times more likely to be unemployed if you haven't graduated high school, when you're 8 times more likely to be jailed if you haven't graduated high school. It is a civil rights issue for our nation, and I just want to commend this leadership of the Harvard Black Alumni Association and Scholastic and America's Promise and the Harvard School of Education for that frame, because it is absolutely the critical gateway into being a full citizen in our society. That's the bad news. The good news is, in my nearly 30 years in nonprofit and public life, I've never seen an issue that has more galvanized so many sectors so quickly. The America's Promise Alliance has just done a fabulous job of getting people to know about this. More organizations are lining up to do their share, and leaders like Chancellor Klein and the Obama administration are leading very, very powerfully. What I can share for your question is as a practitioner. I started City Year nearly 20 years ago because I believe that there's this huge untapped resource in the nation, which is America's youth. There's so much idealism in America's young people, and if they could be called on, they could give so much to the needs of the nation. And what we've realized in the last few years is that there's no higher calling for these young people that you see around here in the red jackets than to work on America's high school dropout crisis. And one of the things that struck us very intensively was Johns Hopkins research that showed very profoundly that there are 3 drivers that are early warning indicators that the Assistant Secretary mentioned: absences, behaviors, and course performance in math and English. The studies show that if you are absent more than 20% of the time, that's a day a week. If you think about it for a minute what that means. Or if you have poor behavioral marks, or if you fail math or English and you're in the 6th grade and you're in a high poverty community, you have less than a 25% chance of graduating with your class 6 years later. So we need to work against absences, behaviors, and course performance. And there's a role, what we've discovered, for national service, working in conjunction with school superintendents and with teachers and administrators. And what we've done with City Year is we fully dedicated it to the national crisis in education. And what these young people do is they go into high poverty schools all across the country, including here in New York, and they are there from 7 in the morning until 7 at night, literally greeting the students in the very beginning of the day and saying welcome to school and getting them excited about being there. At 9 o'clock, they're calling on a list the principal gives them every single child that's absent that day and tries to reach that child, and if they're not sick or a supervising adult, saying, come on in, I want to see you here today. And I just got some results from one of our New Orleans schools that last year at this time had 70% in their, at the Cohen High School in New Orleans attending in the first month, and this year with this call-in and this greeting, it's up to 91%. So we're seeing that we can begin to move the needle on these. And I think what we've seen also is that in many schools, you need sort of another set of adults. And that's what Chancellor Klein has made possible here in New York. We have 220 corps members serving in New York. And we work against those ABCs, absences, behaviors, and course performance. The numbers in PS 154 that I was excited to see, of the 50 children that were tutored by City Year corps members, 48 of them passed the English Language Arts exam, which we know through Chancellor Klein is so critically important, because if you don't pass that, you can't move on. If you don't pass it once, I think you have less than a 50% chance of graduating. If you don't pass it twice along the way, you have a less than a 10% chance of graduating. So these are our threshold issues. And the very exciting thing that I think I'm here to say as a practitioner is that it's possible, working in collaboration with leaders and tapping this energy of young people, to be able to actually drive these numbers down and get kids to stay in school and on track.
So I guess my job is to add some heated disagreement in this mix here, because while I agree with much of what's been said, I want to first start by pointing out that the dropout issue is a symptom of a problem. And if you don't address underlying causes because you focus on the symptom, most people in other fields recognize you're probably not going to solve it. The biggest obstacle to addressing the dropout rate are the false assumptions about why we have one. And the President, along with the Secretary of Education, have expressed some of those false assumptions. Most kids are not dropping out because they're lazy and are tired of being in school. If you read The Silent Epidemic by the Gates Foundation, you will find that over 40% of those kids were actually doing okay in school. You will also find that most immigrant kids who drop out of school drop out to work. They drop out to get jobs. You would also find that this is really not a high school problem. Secretary said he wants to shut down 5,000 dropout factories. It's a bigger problem than that. And when you have kids coming to the 9th grade who are reading at the 3rd grade level, you have an elementary school problem, you've got a middle school problem. So if you only focus on high schools, you're not going to begin to solve it. So the problem is more systemic than that. Why is it that the high-need kids are most likely to drop out? Because the schools are not responding to their needs. Why aren't they responding to their needs? Because they don't have the capacity and the resources, and we consistently put the highest need kids in the schools with the least funding, with the least experienced teachers, and the fewest resources. Now, this is pretty obvious, because all you have to do is visit the schools that are being called the dropout factories, and you open the door and you realize, I wouldn't want to be here either. I had a student last year asked me, he said he was going to do a study on truancy. I said, good idea. He's the assistant principal of the school. He's a doctoral student at NYU. I said, good idea. Only problem is the people you want to study don't go to school. So you're going to have to track them down. And he does. And the first thing he finds out is they're not truant because they're home watching TV. Some of them are like that. Some of them can't afford the subway fare. Some of them are taking care of little brothers and sisters or sick grandparents. That is, the more he starts to look at it, the more he realizes it's far more complicated, and lazy kids isn't the issue. Or it's only part of the issue. False assumptions lead to phony, weak strategies. And if there's nothing else we need to do tonight, is recognize if we keep doing what we've been doing, we won't get a change. The Chancellor is right. We need to be innovative. And I will say here, New York City is doing a better job at this issue than any major city in the United States right now. And it's largely because they have allowed schools to be innovative. So now we have to ask the question, why is it that there are schools like Frederick Douglass High School in Harlem or Thurgood Marshall in Harlem that can graduate 90% of their kids? What's different about those schools? And why don't we do more of what they do? Sounds pretty simple, huh? Except that we don't. And I will, again, give the Chancellor credit, because I think in this city, they are asking those questions. Let's go into those schools with chronic failure. But again, I would say, writ large in the public, the biggest obstacle are the false assumptions. And the President and the Secretary, unfortunately, and I love them both, I know Arnie pretty well, I think it's a problem when you blame the kids.
Would you like to respond?
I would. I am a big fan of Pedro Negreira, so I will start there, and absolutely agree that New York has done a pretty phenomenal job. Look, it's not about which assumptions are true or false. In fact, they all are true. They all bear some relevance. In no way is this administration saying that it is the kids' fault. To the contrary, we are looking for those, what we call promise neighborhoods. Harlem Children's Zone is one of them. The wraparound services, how we can use schools as community builders to provide students what they'll need across the board. It is very much about schools. It is very much about support services outside of schools to make sure that all of the adults in a community and the services in a community come around to help kids get to where they need to go. That said, it is also about personal responsibility. on the young people and personal responsibility on the adults in the system. Pedro's absolutely right. Poor kids and kids of color, if we're talking about the achievement gap specifically, get less of everything that research says makes a difference in public education. So when we talk about a human capital agenda, it is very much headed in the direction of where Joel was going. It's about effective teaching. Right now we use proxies that don't tell us a whole lot about which teachers produce the biggest gains in student achievement, not measured by a single test, but those that are doing the better job at bringing kids up to where they need to go. We don't have a lot of information about that. We need to get better. One of the big things that we're pushing in this administration is better data systems, to truly see children as they journey from pre-kindergarten, as Dr. Comer was saying, all the way through college and beyond. It is the human capital agenda. It is the struggling schools agenda. And let me be clear. This struggling schools agenda is in those cases where schools have persistently and perpetually failed young people about, in those instances where nothing else has worked, taking those schools and transforming them so they do vastly different work. What the Secretary has talked about is the bottom 5% in the nation annually. It's about the bottom 1%, even if we can just tackle the bottom 1%, not just of high schools, but of elementary and middle schools, and turn them around. Sometimes that's about replacing the adults. It's certainly about changing the curriculum. There are 2,000 schools, high schools in this country that produce over 50% of the dropouts, the schools that produce over 50% of the dropouts. Those same 2,000 schools produce over 75% of the dropouts if you are Latino or African American. We absolutely want to hone in on those schools and transform the way they work. So it is about telling the truth about what's happening in schools, holding adults in the systems accountable for sure. The reauthorization of what is currently called No Child Left Behind is going to play a pivotal role in making that happen. The Office for Civil Rights is going to play a pivotal role in ensuring that students are not discriminated against based on their religion, or I'm sorry, based on their race, or their national origin, or their sex. And it is about ensuring that we finally have equitable distribution of the resources that we know matters most. That's about supports, that's about interventions, that's about teachers, that is about facilities. And I promise you, this administration is headed in that direction.
Professor Comer?
I agree with Pedro that the problem is systemic. And and New York has done a good job, and there are other places doing a good job. But we have had schools doing a good job in school reform for 40-some years. And yet we have not changed the system in a way that will make it possible for all children to be successful. My point is that here and there are successes. We have not institutionalized those successes, and that's what has to happen. Now, how do we institutionalize? Well, accountability is important, but how do you hold teachers who have never been taught to support the development of children or to create a culture to support the development of children? How do you hold them accountable for what they weren't taught to do? And most of us don't know that only 80% of all teachers have had at least one child development course. And of that 80%, only 60%, 60% had those courses outside of the School of Education, which means that the effective teachers, for the most part, are ones who either get it once they're in training, once they're in service, or they have it intuitively, but for the most part, they don't get it because they weren't trained. And so I don't want to blame teachers, and we do blame teachers. And we need to change the system in a way that they are prepared and administrators are prepared so that we can create cultures that would prevent at elementary school, at middle school, the dropout that occurs at high school. And that can be done. Somehow, I don't understand it. I don't understand it. I watch my own children grow. I watch my grandchildren grow. I've watched the president's children. I've watched all these children who receive, and all of us who receive good development, succeed in school and succeed in life, and yet we don't understand that the poor kids who don't receive good support for development fail because they don't receive good support for development. Somehow they fail for all these other reasons that we give, but it's support for development that makes a difference. And wherever you provide it, the kids will do well.
I'm struck, Pedro, by your comments, which seemed to suggest that maybe the solution lies in anti-poverty programs more than school reform, although maybe that wouldn't be how you would phrase it. But could all the panelists, and I think, Pedro, we could start with you, given limited resources, where would you make big bets to address this problem?
Well, I mean, I'm all for anti-poverty programs, and but I want to go back. I agree with the chancellor's point, right? That we got to talk about what schools can do. I mean, I don't see even the president's having enough trouble getting health care passed, much less trying to tackle poverty now. So I'm a realist here, okay? So there seems support for doing something about schools. So let's at least acknowledge, and this, I'm glad the Commissioner of New York is here too, because I'm willing to hold them all accountable. Accountability has to start at the top, okay? We want to hold kids accountable and teachers accountable. We've got to hold the people in charge accountable. You want to raise standards? Then that's the easy work. The hard work is, let's get the schools up to standard. Right? That's the hard work. We've had Roosevelt, New York, under state control now for how many years? 30 years? I don't know. It's ridiculous. There are 3,000 kids in Roosevelt. Most of them black and Hispanic. Why can't the state come in and help Roosevelt? Telling that they're failing, is that news? Yeah. Telling schools that they're failing is not an accountability strategy. Now, New York has recently, and I'll give the jab to the chancellor now, they've decided to put letter grades in the schools, and they solved the accountability problem because 95% of schools got A's and B's this year.
That's an enormous success, Pat.
An enormous success.
I'll tell you.
So things are, we're sailing here in New York. But, I think that when we start to dig down and start to ask, why do we still have some schools with chronic failure? Why do we still have kids who are entering high school performing at very low levels? What we start to realize is the ways in which poverty intersects with learning. And any teacher knows hungry kids don't do that well in school. Do we have hungry kids in New York City? Absolutely, and elsewhere. We have kids who are coming to school sick. We have basic needs that are not being addressed. So what we're seeing in the schools with resourceful principals, and I've worked with some of these schools right here, PS 188, when you have a resourceful principal, she knows she's serving high-need kids, so she gets social workers in. She develops a partnership, so mental health services are provided. She's got her kids in extended day programs because they need more. And the sad thing is, it's all on that principal. It shouldn't be left to the principal. The state, the city, they all have to play a role of asking, why are they failing? Telling them they're failing is not helping them. The hard work is to go in and say, okay, what are we going to do to change this? And sometimes you do need to shut it down. But if we're going to use shutting down schools as a strategy, we're going to have to shut down Baltimore. We're going to have to shut down Detroit. We're going to have to shut down New Orleans, St. Louis. I'll name, you're going to have to shut down the whole city. And where will the kids go? That's not a strategy.
Do we have other thoughts from the panelists about where you might invest resources? I think you can see why I introduced Pedro as an activist, by the way. I'm going to invite the audience to start coming up to the microphone, too, if you have a question you'd like to ask the panelists. But
let me respond to your question. I think it's an important framing question, and it gets asked in a variety of different ways, and that is, look, obviously, we all wish we had anti-poverty programs. We wish no kid ever lived in poverty, grew up in poverty, had all the advantages of a stable family and everything that attends there, too. That's not the reality. That's not the facts. Those are not the facts on the grounds. And to me, doing this now for 7 years, I ask people this question. It's a provocative question, but I believe it's a framing question that answers your question, Catherine, and which is, people have told me from the day I took this job, you'll never fix education in America until you fix poverty in America. And I believe that's 180 degrees backward. I believe we will never fix poverty in America until we fix education in America. So that's where I would make my bets. I would make my bets on the kind of partnership Pedro is talking about. We have Pam Cantor, who's here today, doing turnaround work with our schools, kind of partnership Michael and I and Itai have created with City Year, bringing in can-do people in an environment that's often marked by can't do. Focusing on principals, just like Pedro's talking about, who have the wherewithal to understand that instructional leadership matters, but leadership matters more. Partnerships, inspiring people to perform at a different level. Those are the critical ingredients. When they start to happen, they happen in ways that take a positive feedback. And the reason you close things is not because you want to close them. No superintendent, nobody likes to close things. You close things because you come to the conclusion that the levels of dysfunctionality are such that starting over is a better course. And the one thing I know, and I know it deeply, the very same kids, the most challenged kids I have in different schools, perform entirely differently. That's a question of culture, that's a question of expectations, that's a question of what adults will demand with themselves. I have seen too many adults in the system say to me, these kids really aren't going to go very far. And my kids are far too smart not to map that and understand that if people have low expectations, they'll perform to them. And I've seen the very same kids in different schools knocking the leather off the ball. Trust me, this is hard. I don't demean anybody who gives his or her life to teaching or administrating in public schools. But this is doable, and it won't be done if we continue to focus on all the other things and not look at the core business, which is educating our most challenged kids to a very, very different level.
Joel, I agree with you. I agree with you on that. But can you continue to go school by school, place by place, and make a difference? Or do you have to institutionalize it so that you create conditions regularly that will provide that kind of good school?
You've got to institutionalize it, but it happens one school at a time. So, for example, first thing I did was focus on school leadership. Principals are the weakest link in the food chain in education because they're the fewest in number. They have the weakest organizational power.
And they're also trained least well.
And they're trained poorly. And so we focused and created right out of the box a Leadership Academy program. And I think this has become a big thing because if you don't have a good leader, I don't care what they do at Central. You know, I don't care what they do in the region. If you don't have a good school leader, it doesn't happen at the school. And if a leader doesn't know how to recruit teachers, how to support teachers, how to develop them and make them feel they're part of something larger than an isolated classroom, it won't happen. Right? When I got here, people used to say, well, I close my door and I teach, and they don't learn. That was like things people would say to me. So, Jim, you've got to create the conditions, but the conditions that enable that to happen are organic at the school. I don't have a magic wand. There may be smarter commissioners or people who run school districts, superintendents, than I am. But I don't have a silver bullet. People always say to me, well, you should do this, lower class size, extend the day, extend the year, bring in more arts programs, bring in more physical education, do more busing so the kids can get to school earlier and on time and so forth. So these are all competing demands for limited resources. I think it's much more likely that a school community looking at its challenges, willing to innovate and differentiate, much more likely that they will get it right than some edict from Central is going to come down and figure out for 1,500 schools how to organize the place. And the things that Pedro's talking about, those things are real. We've got some schools out there right now that are so exciting to go to. And you know why that is? Because we have taken the collar off them and allowed them to do their work, to prioritize and differentiate. And when you have those kind of schools, other people want to go see them. And it's such an exciting thing to see. And you then create this rising tide in the system. And the last comment, which goes to a point you're making, the other thing we can't let anyone off the hook, especially at a meeting like this, the ed schools got to come part of this reform. No, Bob, you can smile. But I mean, you see, I have got to hire teachers who have a degree from an ed school, right? The state requires that from me. But the state should also insist that the ed schools train my teachers and train my administrators so that when they come to us, they're prepared to do the work. And they, too, have to be part of this accountability.
Michael's next, I think.
Yeah, go ahead. Thanks. Clearly, the question with regard to where would you place a big bet, there's clearly got to be a number of large levers to pull on, especially with regards to school leadership, superintendent leadership. The one that I've seen that we could do rather rapidly, something that could be game-changing, is call on America's young people to help America's children. National Service has a mission, an absolute mission to help transform these schools. It's not, I'm not sitting here saying it's the only thing. Of course it's not. But look around at these young people here at 9 o'clock here tonight. We have 1,500 young people across the country. And they're here tonight because they care. And guess what? Not only are they making a difference in schools every day, and literally they're changing the culture. Because clearly you don't have to just change what the children are doing in schools, you have to change the adults as well. And one of the ways you do that is to fire them up in the morning. And when you guys greet all those teachers in the morning, you know you put a smile on their face and make things possible. And we're seeing the numbers change. The Edward M. Kennedy Serve America Act was passed by the Obama administration in the first 100 days. It calls for the growth of AmeriCorps from 75,000 to 250,000 members by 2016. And now what we have to do is fight every year to actually have it appropriated. City Year and AmeriCorps applicants have tripled in size in 1 year. And yet we are turning away 5 applicants for everyone that wants to be here for, frankly, very low pay to help work with teachers and administrators and superintendents to help turn these schools around. One of the most game-changing things we could do is give America's young people a mission and say, don't just think about yourselves, think about a year in service to your country, and think about helping to turn these schools around. In addition to the Serve America Act, there's a number of acts pending in Congress now that could actually bring a lot of resources into high-poverty schools across the country. There's the Graduation Promise Act, which is focused on bringing more resources into high schools, the Success in the Middle Act, doing the same thing in the middle schools, and the Keeping Pace Act, which would bring consortium of organizations to help bring their resources against. We have to make this a national issue. And the final thing I want to say about this is when these guys grow up, they're all 17 and 24 now, they're adults, but when they go on in their life, if we could have 500,000 young people over time who know what's going on in our nation's schools, forget about it. This generation will do something about it. They will cut through everything because they've actually seen what's going on in schools. And they'll listen to the part that they believe in, they'll stand up for what's right, and they'll have a certain legitimacy, frankly, because of their direct service at, frankly, very low pay, working well into the night to move children forward in schools across the country. So the lever that I think we can pull on, for sure, one of them, is the national service lever for turning around schools in the country.
Dr. Comer and then Dr. Noguera.
I agree with that. But I also think that, and I would place my bet, and I was asking Joel that question because I think it's the schools of education and any preparatory institution. We cannot, year after year, send people into schools to do a job that they have not been prepared to do and then blame them for not being able to do it. And they are the ones who are in a position to understand the importance of child and adolescent development like nobody else. You can bring resources in, you can mobilize people, you can energize people, and if they still don't understand that children learn when you intentionally support their development and support their growth in a way that prepares them to be successful in school and in life, if you have all that energy and you're still not helping them learn that, then we're not going to get anywhere. And it's in the school of education where a teacher learns as he or she becomes a teacher that part of what it means to be a teacher is somebody who supports the development of children.
So here's another common sense idea. How about early intervention? Minneapolis has been identifying kids in the 3rd grade who are not on par in reading, and what they do is they target those kids with additional resources. We have all the knowledge we need to know how to intervene with kids early. We don't do it. And that's part of the problem. And we know how to provide the supports because we know the kids who are making progress academically will be much less likely to drop out. So I would say let's target them early and continue that support throughout. Let me say something about schools of education. They're an easy target because they are the stepchild, unfortunately, right, Kathy, of the university. Let's talk about the whole university. Universities are lousy citizens. I lived in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Most of Cambridge is owned by Harvard and MIT. You should get smart just by moving to Cambridge, right? Except Cambridge has lousy public schools. Why? Because neither university does anything of substance for the Cambridge public schools. Columbia University is in Harlem. They may not know it, but they are in Harlem. What does Columbia do for the children of Harlem? Right? NYU is here in the Lower East Side. I can go on. What do we get from these major universities that are centers of thinking? Yes, schools of education, they got their shares of problem, and I'm in there battling. But the fact is that we're parts of universities, in some cases with very large endowments. And we have an obligation to do more to work with schools, public schools, in addressing this issue than we do now. And just raising standards, as City College did. Right? When you know very well you are now going to limit access to the kids who need to be there, that's the easy work. The hard work is figuring out, okay, what do we do to make sure that universities stay accessible? That's the hard work. And that's the work I don't see many universities taking on.
It's time to hear from you. It is audience participation time. Don't be frightened. Okay, first question, and again, please make it succinct.
Hi. I have a question specifically about, Chancellor Klein, what you said about that the most challenged students might need more time. I was wondering if you could elaborate on what you mean by that, and I'm wondering specifically about what you and the rest of the panelists think of the idea that perhaps for some of our students, our most challenged students, maybe a high school education takes more than 4 years. I think we've become more open to this at the college level. I had a classmate at Harvard who took 6 years to get his bachelor's degree, and we were all really envious about that. There was no stigma about the fact that it was taking him more than 4 years. But I think with my students, and I'm a high school English teacher, that it's humiliating for students when they realize that because, as one of you used as an example, a student comes in 9th grade with a 3rd grade reading level, and they're simply not able to make up 9 years of reading skills in the 4 years that they're with us. And maybe they do need a 5th year. So I'm wondering what you and the rest of the panelists think about that idea that maybe students would stay in school if they felt that there was a place for them even after many of their classmates had graduated in 4 years. Thank you.
So first of all, I think a number of people have said this. I think if you try to think of the dropout problem as a high school problem, you're going to miss the game. The dropout problem starts way, way earlier than that. And when I'm talking about more time, we're missing some of the earliest years for our children. That is, kindergarten seems to me to not be the preferred entry grade for kids who are growing up in the most challenged environments, and we ought to be thinking about extending their educational time. But I mean educational, not babysitting time. Then I think if you take a city like mine, what you see all the time is we can actually make real gains during the school year in reading even, which is a big challenge in the early grades. Kids go home 2-3 months over the summer, and then they fall backward, right? So we're losing that ground. If we could arrange in an 11-month school year, particularly for our most challenged kids, I think would be terrific. I don't get this 9 to 3. We used to do that because people apparently had to go farming in the morning or something like that. But I don't get a 9 to 3 school day. Some of my charter schools and some of my public schools that have after-school programs have got kids there basically from 7:30 in the morning till 5, 6 o'clock at night. And yes, I agree with you. I don't think we should make it a shame for a kid to take 5 or even 6 years to graduate high school. We report those statistics not because we don't wish every kid would graduate in 4, but it's better to me that a kid takes 5 years, she graduates in 5, than she says, if I didn't graduate in 4, I'll drop out.
Thank you. Next question from this side.
My name is Vasco Bilbao Bastida, and I just want to thank the panelists and the organizers of this event. So, some research suggests that first-generation minority immigrant children often have more positive behavioral outcomes and academic success than their multi-generational peers, despite having more developmental risks growing up in an immigrant household. What lessons do you think can be learned from this, I guess you could call it an immigrant education paradox?
Well, I can address that. It's actually more mixed than that, but there is some evidence. It's also true, if you look at the health data, that many immigrants are healthier when they first come, but the longer they're here, the less healthy they become. And you know, it's called the epidemiological paradox, right? That is somehow, even though they're low income, they are healthier and more resilient. I think it says a lot about the toxic environment in our communities and in our schools, that children who are coming with supportive families do often have a lot of drive, a lot of interest in learning. What they lack often are the language skills, and if they can get those, and especially if they come young, they will get them early and then they can thrive. The real problem is that in many of our schools, we treat not speaking English as a disability. We have too many teachers that don't know how to work with kids who don't speak English, and therefore those kids get relegated into classes that lead nowhere. So you'll see what they're calling in New York City now, and it's true elsewhere, long-term English language learners. They never learn English. And these are kids who become semi-literate in 2 languages. They neither know their primary language nor English. And those kids are really badly off. And that's all about the inability, the lack of capacity within the school to respond to the needs of those kids. But it's also about the attitude towards those kids. If you don't think those kids deserve to be there, if you think that their language and their culture is the problem, then you probably aren't going to treat them very well either.
Any other thoughts from the panelists?
I would just agree with Pedro there on especially around the English language learner issue and phenomenon in this country. So for example, in Los Angeles Unified School District, the biggest subgroup of kids that failed their graduation test were ELL students. That's not surprising. You see patterns like that everywhere. That though, when those data were unpacked a little further, it turns out that 60% of those ELL students, 66% that had failed the high school exit exam had been in ELL programs for 10 years or more. In fact, over half of the ELL students were actually born in this country. So the way in which we help students learn English, we have a long way to go in this country to get better at. Pedro's right, far too often it is seen as a disability, and we label it. It actually, the answer to this relates back to the first question, and that is the issue of more time, especially if you are needing to learn English while in school as well as content. You're going to need more time to learn, and teachers will need more time to teach. That's about extending the school day. That is very much about extending the school year. As it relates to longer graduation times, we just want to be really careful. You wouldn't want to see a pattern of black and brown students and students learning English perpetually in school for much longer than their more advantaged peers. Mm-hmm. It too can become an excuse and a way out.
Okay. Next question from this side.
My name's Chris Troy from the Boston Urban Youth Foundation, and a comment about maybe some policy strategy. Chris Swanson had a study on graduation rates by congressional district. And there are 60 congressional districts with graduation rates less than 60%. In fact, Nancy Pelosi's is 49%. There are districts, congressional districts here in New York with 36%, 24%, 41%. I won't name the names. It would seem to me that targeting funding through congressional districts that would be comprehensive elementary through high school, not focusing in on the back end of the pipeline. Elementary, middle, in particular, those two, as well as high school, and focusing in on overage students the recent study here in New York by Advocates for Children on the huge explosion of overage students. Those are the ones that are going to drop out. And as well as another topic that we haven't talked about, which is foster care. Those students are dropping out in high numbers. There doesn't seem to be any targeted resources or funding for those young people.
Who would like to start?
I mean, just say that money is necessary, but I would be the first to say more money in a failed system won't get you change.
Yeah.
You have to know how to spend the funds. It has to be targeted, has to be strategic. We have a long history in this country of wasting money on failed reforms. New York City, well, Ambassador Annenberg, $1 billion on urban school reform. Right? So my point is, Chris, I'm not arguing against money. I am arguing because the problem is that we have lots of examples of failed reforms, and I think it's a lot because we haven't really gotten at the roots of it. And I think that if you look at some of what's happening in New York, where there is, I have to sing the praises of New York because I'm going around the country and I'm not seeing this kind of success in lots of other places.
No, there's a lot of innovation here in New York. All I'm saying, there's going to be money directed. I'm asking the question, or really raising the question, are there some better ways to direct it? So, for instance, the struggling school strategy of this new administration, it sounds to me like it's focused in on high schools. That makes me nervous because everybody on the panel has already agreed that we need to focus on elementary and middle.
It's not.
That's good. And therefore, and maybe rather than focusing in on those 2,000 schools, ignoring the feeder middle schools, maybe there's a congressional district strategy targeting those 60 congressional districts, or you just pick a number.
So Secretary Ali, maybe you could say just a word and then we'll get to the next questions, but
just to alleviate a little bit of confusion, the secondary school strategy and that idea of honing in on those dropout factories, what is commonly called dropout factories, which really does put too much onus on the young people in them, is very much about the feeder patterns. It is very much about the communities in which those schools live. And it's about, to Pedro's point earlier, it is not just about shutting them down and letting the kids spread across a district or a state. It is about transforming them, shutting them down, and reopening them into innovative centers for change and reform. It is also very much about a K-12, a pre-K through high school and beyond strategy. So while high schools certainly get a lot of the attention, the work in the department is about the entire spectrum of learning. Should we reassess the way monies are distributed? This administration is, in fact, doing some of that. You've probably heard about the Race to the Top initiative, which is a competitive grant program, more discretionary money than any secretary's had before, and $4.35 billion of that will be distributed to a handful of states that meet an extraordinary bar of criteria for improved student learning over time, and closing the achievement gap amongst a host of other factors. Should we get more creative? Sure. And as we move into education reform and as we move into the reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, you can bet that funding formulas will be a big topic for the Congress.
next question.
I'm Gavin McCarthy, and I guess I'm one of the young people. So I think that Secretary Ali called attention to the fact that most kids drop from boredom rather than being challenged. And with that being said, I wonder, what do you think is the significance of having mixed classes of people who range from being very ill-equipped to grasp information easily and people who seem to do it naturally? And I just wondered what your thoughts were on that.
Any thoughts on tracking or lack thereof?
I think he asked.
there are all sorts of learning styles for young people. What we know from the past, though, is ability grouping, this idea of putting young people in a classroom with students of their purported caliber can lend itself to tracking that doesn't go away. It's about good teaching, and for teachers and school systems and the superintendents alike, all the way up, knowing how to differentiate learning styles, differentiate instruction so that they help students from where they are, as I've said, to get them to where they need to go. But a heterogeneous classroom can work well if students and the teachers have the supports they need to succeed in them. Ability grouping can work well if it's not tracking that leads to dead-end tracks for some and college readiness for others.
But who do you suppose benefits most from tracking programs if they're mixed between high-level students and low-level students?
The data, and Pedro, I'm sure you can speak to this, the data on that is mixed, right? Sometimes teachers will dumb it down, for lack of a better term, and you'll hear stories of where the curriculum is so low level that it doesn't challenge the students that are higher level in the classroom. Sometimes they start at the higher level and those that aren't ready to access that curriculum feel blocked out. But it is about, again, making sure that teachers know and have the supports they'll need to take kids wherever they are on the spectrum and accelerate their learning or keep them on grade level.
I think this is an important question, and I think it's one that we have to start to think differently about. And if you'd like to follow up in the spring, we started a pilot last summer called a School of One, in which we decided we would figure out and aim the instruction at the individual and let him or her move at their pace. And what happens is you find different people with different modalities succeeding in different ways. And so instead of thinking of a class of 25 kids who are in very different spaces, and a teacher inevitably has to teach toward the middle, that's what happens. And then you have fall off on either end to really start to differentiate the way we approach instruction. But the one thing, unfortunately, nobody got on this panel who didn't go through K-12 education. You can't skip it. And the one thing we all know from that experience is the thing that motivates kids is the intellectual engagement that teachers and other kids provide. Right. So this school I was at today, which again, I'll be happy to send you to, these kids are all, what they do is they have missions that they work on, and each mission is subdivided into quests, and it's all a challenge-driven. And while we call it the game school, trust me, it is fun and they are games, but it's a very effective form of education. How well it'll do, it's in the earliest innings right now. But if you come there and watch these sixth grade kids, and I ask them what's the difference between this year and last year, they said, I can't wait to get here this year. At least in the early innings, those are good reviews.
My neighbor's son goes to the school and singing the praise. What we know is concentrating high-need kids together with weak teachers is not a good strategy. That's what we do still in a lot of places. Okay. We also know that simply mixing the kids is not necessarily a solution, and Rosalina, I think, made that point very well. I think what the chancellor is saying, personalizing instruction, is got to be part of the strategy. Now, the problem with that is that it takes resources, it takes a lot of skill, but I think that is the way we need to move toward. There's also a possibility, my daughter goes to a public school here in New York called School of the Future. You teach there?
No, I go.
You go there? You go there. You look a little old to be going to high school still, but anyway. You know, the kids at the school...
Wait a second. That's one of my kids. Wait a second. I put up with almost anything, but nobody pounds on my kids. Put the 30 seconds down. When he apologizes, we'll continue. Kid, what are you talking about, man?
It never ceases to amaze me when I go to these schools. But well, you know, the kids work in do their exhibitions every year in consultation with the teacher, right? And they're talking about high standards. That's about making high standards accessible to kids. My daughter did her exhibition in 9th grade. She worked on the Roman and the Inca Empire all year long. had to write a 25-page research paper and then present that paper in a PowerPoint to teachers, students, and parents. She and I know more about the Romans and the Incans than I ever thought I would know. But every kid in the school has to do that. And I'm sure, you know, it's not always as great as it sounds, but I think that's also, to me, an example of what it takes to get many kids to perform at a higher level.
Just want to point out that you're talking about developmentally appropriate teaching.
There you go. Okay. Well, we have about 10 minutes left, so let's have as many questions as we can. Please ask your question quickly.
I'm a Shirley Moy, a New York City school parent of a first grader. My concern is which these challenged kids. We are teaching in 2004 I'll call it the Teachers College Columbia method of curriculum, which is totally confusing, I think, for challenged kids, ELL learners, but we have a one-stop shopping because the books are cheaper. So the question is, they had done a pilot with the Core Knowledge Early Literacy program, which said that these kids did 6 times better than our current curriculum. The question here is, you know, do you know how it works? There's baskets of books, and the poor one teacher has to teach 25 different kids, 25 different books. So how are these teachers providing guided reading? So early literacy is a major problem because if the kids are not read to, or the kids don't have activist parents, they're not learning how to read properly. So by the time they get to high school, they're dropping out. So I think if you solve the early literacy curriculum problem and not one type of curriculum fits everyone, I think you will have better literacy throughout the grades. That's my 2 cents on, I mean, I'm going to ask your 2 cents, but, you know. that's all I have to say.
That's great. No, and that core knowledge thing is very, very interesting, what we're doing. And what's going on at Shuangwen is also very exciting. Shuangwen is a dual language, Mandarin, Chinese, and English language school. We get kids from really all over the city who come there. It is probably the highest performing elementary school in the city of New York right now. And in addition to doing really well in reading and math, the kids exited speaking Mandarin Chinese.
Right, but TC does not have, I'll call, say, core content. Kids get to pick whatever, you know, Little Bear, and that's fine, whatever the curriculum of the day is. There's no, I'll say, vocabulary, spelling, and grammar, which is basic things. I had to fight in our school to get spelling and grammar. That's kind of an advantage school, not the least advantage school. I'm sure the least advantage schools cannot go fight and get spelling and grammar for their school. I mean, I'm just saying, curriculum is a problem.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move to the next question.
Valerie Armstrong Barrows. I'm the president of the Citywide Council on High Schools, which is a group of elected parents. We represent all the parents of all the students in high schools across the city. My question addresses the implementation of the raised standards for graduation for the regents. Now that students have to have a 65 on every regent in order to graduate, what initiatives do you think should be put in place immediately to get our children up to that standard, taking in consideration that these are low standards to start with, but that we have only 30% in the 30th percentile of our students who are African American and Latino graduated with a Regents diploma. We no longer will have the local diplomas, which has a lower graduation rate for the Regents exam. And also taking into consideration the fact that we're opening up a lot of small high schools which aren't prepared yet to have the programs in place to prepare our students for those regents. Also considering that we are putting high schools in elementary and middle school buildings where they don't have the science and math labs and have to use lab carts. And also considering in some of our districts, like District 20 in Brooklyn, which is one of the districts I represent, where we have a lot of military families that are being moved around the United States and come into our state with graduates who are in the 11th and 12th grade and cannot make the standards that are needed for our current graduation.
It's wonderful to hear from parents. What are your thoughts on the many issues that you raised?
Let me say, it's obviously, first of all, thank you for your service, and it's obviously very important and not a question one can answer quickly and easily. What I would say to you, virtually everything we are doing is about addressing those issues. I wish we could do them more quickly, and I wish we had more resources with which to do them. But when we started, as you know, the graduation rate, by the way the state calculates it, was about 46% citywide, and that was with local diplomas. Today it is 61% citywide. That 15%, most of that is Regents diplomas. So in fact, by raising the standards, and in fact by an increased 37.5 minutes a day for struggling kids, by the partnerships we do with City Year and with Turnaround and other groups that are represented here tonight, Children's Aid, I think all of those things together are working. The other things we need to do, we need to invest intelligently in our students. So you talk about, rightly so, every kid should have a lab. But you know what? More important than the lab is a great math and science teacher. And we have policies that don't make sense. We shouldn't pay every teacher based only on the length of time. We should differentiate what we pay. Great math and science teachers can create a lab for kids. I've seen it done. And it's not the one or the other, but we need more rational human resource policies. So as long as we continue to pay gym teachers and math teachers the same thing, we're not going to get the right supply. And if we don't get the right supply, the kids in our highest needs communities are going to struggle. I would like to see us invest in longer time, in longer days, in more time on task for kids, and a whole bunch of other things. But basically, everything we are trying to do is to simultaneously raise standards and get our kids to meet them. And I don't think there's going to be any shortcuts in that.
What we're seeing is it's a matter of scale. Schools weren't necessarily designed to have 80 or 90% of the children needing extra help. But since they need extra help, we need to bring more caring adults into that environment, and we need to scale that. And one of the things that we're seeking to do in other organizations, we're seeking to reach 50% of all of the off-track students in all of the 20 cities that we're in. That would reach hundreds of thousands of young people, because clearly, if you can bring more caring adults into the schools, every single child will receive more one-on-one attention. And then what happens is the teacher can focus on a differentiated learning basis with different kids, sometimes accelerating the ones that are ready for more work, and sometimes working with the kids that are the furthest behind. And so really what we're facing so many times with regards to this issue that I'm seeing across the country is just an issue of scale. How do we scale those resources? And time and again, it comes bringing more volunteers, especially full-time ones, into our schools.
I think we have time for only one more question, and it is yours.
Some young people back here. You guys really want to speak? Let me let them speak.
Okay.
All right, our school, my name is Eric Barno, and
my name is Mariam Fal. My name is Rosella.
all right, our school is Bayard Rustin Educational Complex, School for the Humanities, and it's being shut down in 2012 due to low test and communities. And I believe that this decision is unfair. Many of our students under the 12th grade will have to worry about transferring to other schools unprepared. I believe that you as a palate believe in intervention rather than shutting it down, yet our school have yet to reap these benefits. The only thing that we have received is hate towards our school in the neighborhoods newspaper. They do not care if we graduate. They find that minorities make the neighborhood unsafe for people who live there, which results in our school failing, and teachers in the school who care get fired, and the teachers who are only there for their paycheck stay. How do you plan to fix these issues?
And before you answer, I want to say one more thing. In 9th grade, when I was a freshman, I never knew about the SAT, and I think that was sad. And I think since I'm a student and I live it every day, it really hurts that we can't have the books and we can't have the right teachers. And I feel that if I was a freshman and if I came to the school and I had the right teachers and I had the books and I had just people that really cared and told me everything that I need to get to 12th grade. I'm in 12th grade now, I'm succeeding. And it's not because of my school. It's because of my parents. It's because of my family. It's because of my church family. So it's the school, they can take me but so far. But if I had people behind me, not the state, not the city, because they don't do anything for me. It's my parents that do stuff for me. It's my church family that do things for me. My friends that keep holding me up through 9th grade. So you can fix it, and you can say we're going to do this and that, but at the end of the day, we make our own decisions. And people that are helping us really care, and we don't feel that you guys care. And it hurts, but that's the reality that we live through every day. We have to, like, it really hurts that we have to go through that every day.
I am really glad that I'm here today to find that there are people who are actually caring about what's going on, and they're giving us details about what they're trying to do. So now I really want to know, how can you really articulate this motivation that you motivate us today to understand that what we are doing is correct, and that as long as we don't drop out of high school, that we can make it? How can you articulate my fellow students that, how can you prove them that dropping out of high school can not make them succeed later in life? And how can you prevent that? That's my question.
So I suppose I should answer it in this way. First of all, I want to thank you, all three of you, for being here. And second of all, I want to make a bet. I want to make a bet all three of you will graduate, and cut a deal with you. If you do and you would like, I will come to the graduation to salute you, because I know it hasn't been easy. No, I admire the, the commitment and the passion. I guess it goes to two things that you said that struck me, which is, one thing you said was, well, somehow the good teachers left and the bad teachers stayed, and that kind of confirms what I think is something that's not working, is because if you're feeling like the people who are engaging you, the people who are committed to you, the people who are not just going through the motions are leaving the school, that I think really means we have to look at things differently. And then this young woman in the front row said, you're succeeding because of your parents and because of all the other things. And my whole thing is, obviously your parents and your friends and all that matters, but schools should be helping you to succeed. It shouldn't be neutral, and certainly shouldn't be negative. So that's kind of why we're starting over. The thing about the community bothers me, and that's something we got to address. Someday in America, people will understand, as important as community is, we are in this together. And if you don't succeed, and kids in your school don't succeed, our city and our nation will pay a price for that. So it's not about where you start. I grew up in public housing, and teachers changed my life. And it's about what your contribution is. And that's why I want to end on a note that's really important to me. See, what Michael does is convince young people that giving back, that serving your city, serving your community, serving your nation really matters. And each of us should understand in America right now what it's about is giving back to your community. What it's about is supporting others who aren't as fortunate as you are. What it's about is making sure that you remember all the time that the nation, the community, the city are most underprivileged people. If we're not in it for them, then we're not in it for nothing, and we got to change that. So again, thank you for coming here today. I hope to see you at your graduation.
I have to say something. I have to say something, though, about what's happening at Ruston, because it's also happening at Brandeis. And that phase-out strategy, and this speaks to this national idea of shutting down failing schools. You know what happens when you're a student at a school that you know is phasing out? What happens to your rest of your education? You know, I really have a problem with the strategy, because I've been in these schools, and they are demoralized. The atmosphere is horrible. So in effect, if they persist, let's all stand up and cheer, because they will have persisted under some awful conditions. We need a better strategy than this. To tell these kids, and I'm also concerned about the fact these schools in Manhattan, where I know there's a lot of people in Upper West Side who they would like that school for them. who's going to get that school? You know, these are important civil rights equity issues. And we've got to make sure that they're not being ignored. And we've got to ask, why did the school fail in the first place? I was talking to the principal at Brandeis. She said, I was taking in transfer kids all year long. Well, when you're taking in kids all year long, your ability to meet their needs, you're being set up. So I think we've got to be careful about the strategy. I admire the chancellor's courage, say we're going to do something better, we're going to shut it down, but what about these kids? Well, in the meantime,
a good turnaround strategy is one that when we say shut down the school, it's about immediately reopening. It's not about scattering those students across the district, but reopening those schools, if done right. And Joel, you'll speak to what you're doing specifically here. The strategy as articulated by the Secretary of Education is about making sure that those kids are protected. Let us be clear, if shutting down a school can very much be a real civil rights violation. It can be a Title VI violation. If those students don't have their needs met immediately, and if the system doesn't ensure that the alternative to the school that they were in that's persistently failing is not significantly better for them.
Well, I think clearly the Harvard Black Alumni Society of New York needs to invite the panel back. I feel extraordinarily privileged to have been a listener along with all of you. I thought this was an extraordinary conversation. I took notes. And I just want to thank the 5 panelists whose work as educators improves the lives of learners each and every day. So please join me in thanking tonight's panelists.